Hey everyone! So this video has been a long time coming, but today is the day we're going to talk about what it means to be an SJW. The term social justice warrior actually originated as a positive term to describe someone who fights for social justice issues, but now it is widely used as a derogatory term. When we think of an SJW, we think of someone who's emotionally reactive, self-righteous, assumptive, and quick to brand people as racist, sexist, transphobic, Islamophobic, the list goes on. If you look up SJW on Urban Dictionary, the top definition is a person who uses the fight for civil rights as an excuse to be rude, condescending, and sometimes violent for the purpose of revealing their frustrations or validating their sense of unwarranted moral superiority. The behaviors of social justice warriors usually have a negative impact on the civil rights movement, turning away potential allies and fueling the resurgence of bigoted groups that scoop up people who have been burned or turned off by social justice warriors. Used in a sentence, if social justice warriors could just fuck off, we could actually make some progress. According to Wikipedia, it's defined as a pejorative term for an individual who promotes socially progressive views, including feminism, civil rights, and multiculturalism, as well as identity politics. The accusation that somebody is an SJW carries implications that they are pursuing personal validation and engaging in disingenuous arguments. The SJW is also criticized as the stereotype of the feminist, unreasonable, sanctimonious, biased, and self-aggrandizing. This describes a certain type of person on the left, but not all leftists. You can be far left and care deeply about social justice issues without being an SJW in this sense. Examples that come to mind are Naomi Klein, Cornel West, and here on YouTube, ContraPoints and Tiffany Ferguson. Oh, and one thing to note, you can display SJW behavior from time to time without being a full-blown SJW, just as you can say something racist without being a full-blown racist. Humans are very complex creatures. To provide a little backstory, when I was in college, I got sucked into the atheist YouTube rabbit hole, and once videos shitting on creationists got old, the Skeptic scene on YouTube turned to shitting on SJWs. For a while, I didn't call myself a feminist because, for one, I had never felt oppressed as a woman, and second, I didn't want to be associated with these radical third-wave feminists. I was very much influenced by these edgy anti-PC influencers like Bill Maher, Sam Harris, and YouTubers like Shoe-on-Head. Fortunately, Shoe-on-Head has evolved, so I'm still a fan. Anyways, that was kind of where I was at a few years ago, and I didn't realize at the time that these people were picking low-hanging fruit. And there was much more to the intersectional leftist perspective. I would say my evolution of thought was the reverse of Lacey Green's. For those of you who aren't familiar with Lacey Green, she was this prominent feminist YouTuber who was shit on constantly by the anti-SJWs. But she was actually willing to listen to them, and she had this red pill awakening after engaging with them more. In other words, she's a rational person who cares about social justice issues, but rejects groupthink. Her sympathies started with the SJWs, whereas my sympathies started with the anti-SJWs. I don't follow Lacey too closely, but it seems like we're on the same page. Atheist, pro-science, pro-nuance. A common thread I've noticed among these anti-SJW skeptics is that they seem to apply more skepticism to leftist ideology than they do to the status quo. The more I learn about history and politics, the more important I realize it is to have proportional skepticism. We should be just as skeptical of our default assumptions as we are of fringe beliefs like anarchy, for example. The problem with SJWs is that they're ineffective communicators and express inflammatory views that are not well thought out. It seems that they are incapable of understanding nuance and giving people the benefit of the doubt. They interpret things in the most uncharitable way and are quick to judge, call out, and cancel people. They're also highly susceptible to groupthink. However, this behavior is not unique to the left. Groupthink is a problem across the board, as humans have a disposition to confirmation bias. There are many examples of right-wingers who are ineffective communicators, express ridiculously inflammatory views, lack the ability to think critically, and participate in outrage culture. Progressives are often accused of weaponizing identity politics, and I'm not saying they never do. This is a prime characteristic of the SJW. But I also see neoliberal Democrats weaponizing identity politics against progressives. They prop up corporate shill candidates like Hillary Clinton, Kamala Harris, and Pete Buttigieg, and then turn around and accuse Bernie supporters of being sexist, racist, or homophobic for criticizing them. And they won't shut up about the fact that Bernie is an old white dude. Diversity is important, of course, but policy positions and voting record should be the most important metrics in deciding who to vote for.
I eventually had to face the fact that the liberal appropriation of social justice isn't really about empowerment. It's about creating a category of perpetual victimhood that can be mined for social capital without actually challenging the systems that perpetuate victimhood in the first place. Not only does this kind of mentality leave oppressed people vulnerable to attacks, it also creates an environment where no real social gains can actually be made. Identity should never be used as a means to assert and accumulate power. Identity should never ever be used as a shield from criticism. And most importantly, identity should never be seen as a merit in and of itself.
Ironically, conservatives who lambast identity politics are sure quick to use these tactics when it suits their narrative. Conservatives love to tokenize people with marginalized identities who have internalized misogyny, racism, whatever it is, and will perpetuate the negative stereotypes against members of their own group. Anti-black racism is less obvious to the mainstream when it's coming from a black person. Women who bash feminism and gay men who bash the LGBT community are very valuable to propagandists. Why? Because of their identity. This should illustrate the closeness between the Republican Party and the corporate Democrats. Both weaponize identity politics against the left and serve to uphold capitalism. As Cornel West beautifully put it, we've tried black faces in high places, and look where it's gotten us. I reject this type of identity politics used by anyone, and I strongly reject this characterization of the left. Unfortunately, the pejorative label SJW has been bastardized by centrists and conservatives to dismiss anyone who brings up social justice issues. I've seen this exact same thing happen with the term virtue signaling. Anyone who uses their social media platform to speak out against injustice or show solidarity is accused of virtue signaling. I'm not one to dismiss these labels altogether because of the way they've been bastardized. I think that they are valuable. Virtue signaling is a real-ass thing, and I've been guilty of it myself. But it's good to be aware so that you think before you post and ask yourself, is sharing this actually helpful or is it performative? Am I contributing to the very thing that I'm signaling I'm against? Asking these questions motivates us to take action, and however small, action is better than paying lip service. Without terms like virtue signaling catching on, fewer people would be aware that their Facebook posts and retweets, absent of any effort or action, are nothing more than performative allyship or ally theater. I've dealt with a handful of SJWs being involved in animal rights and environmental activism. If you spend enough time in social justice land and you're not an SJW, you'll know what I'm talking about. The people who assume the worst in you and go behind your back and talk a bunch of shit, instead of asking for clarification or having an amicable conversation despite not seeing 100% eye to eye. Unfortunately, there are some people out there who will exploit the good intentions of others within progressive spaces and weaponize their marginalized identity against someone else. I've seen this firsthand, but an example that comes to mind is Elizabeth Warren throwing Bernie under the bus. But the SJW stereotype is about as representative of social justice advocates as the militant vegan stereotype is of vegans. Extreme views and behaviors get amplified because humans are naturally drawn to controversy, and social media algorithms favor posts that get more engagement. In reality, most social justice advocates, including vegans, don't fit this militant, self-righteous stereotype. We may be angry, but our anger comes from a very valid place, and most of us try to quell it in order to be an effective activist. Restraint and patience are both skills that take practice, and most people, regardless of where they fall on the political spectrum, haven't mastered them. And that is why I'm not against progressives taking back the term. I know a few self-proclaimed social justice warriors who denounce cancel culture and black and white thinking. But they're also quick to flip the sensitive snowflake trope on its head, because the people who rage the hardest against PC culture and hypersensitivity on the left are some of the most hostile, incoherent, and fragile people to engage with. These people need a trigger warning for a trigger warning. The last thing I wanted to bring up is this concept of the intolerant left. How many times have we heard someone complain about how intolerant the left is, how they just want to shut down conversations and dissent, and can't accept the fact that other people have different political opinions? I've talked about this on my channel before, but this is an inaccurate characterization because, as I mentioned earlier, tribalism is a problem across the political spectrum. And it's misguided because in order to live in a tolerant society, we must be intolerant of intolerance. That is the paradox of tolerance. So the intolerance of the left is generally a direct response to the intolerance of the right. Whether it be the intolerance of homosexuality or immigrants with brown skin, or the ignorance and denial of the intolerable conditions that people live in due to right-wing economic policies. I will say though, of course there are people out there who are passionate about social justice, but suck at communicating and go about things in the wrong way. This trend of unfriending and outright disowning friends and family who support Trump or say something racist or transphobic or whatever it is not an effective strategy for achieving social justice. Because not only are you creating an echo chamber, you're also reinforcing the stereotype of the intolerant left. I think you can express your intolerance of someone's beliefs without expressing intolerance of them as a person. I'm not saying you have to maintain a close relationship with them, because it's natural to form stronger bonds with people who share your worldview. But here's the thing, most people are heavily indoctrinated. It's hard to say this without sounding arrogant, but it's true. 95% of society supports this. For me personally, going vegan made me a more forgiving person because it forced me to separate people from their beliefs and habits and judge them for the whole of who they are. Otherwise, I would view almost every single person as a literal monster. You may think, people should know by now not to be racist or homophobic. It's 2020. And to that, I would say it should be obvious, yes. But you have to remember, despite how much we've created and accomplished as a species, we're not highly morally evolved, supremely intelligent beings. Cognitive biases and self-interest cloud our judgment. It should be obvious that this is wrong. And by wrong, I mean supporting it is absolutely inexcusable. Unfortunately, this isn't obvious to most people due to layers and layers of indoctrination. The same is true for other isms like racism. Racism persists because of self-interest and indoctrination. If you believe it is morally righteous to blacklist anyone who supports Trump in any capacity, you're essentially saying that mere association with someone is akin to accepting and condoning their beliefs and behavior. But does my association with non-vegans make me somehow complicit in the animal agriculture industry? No, because I'm not silent about the issue. People know where I stand. And it would be a terrible strategy for vegans to completely cut ties with their non-vegan friends and family. There's something to be said about the egregiousness of their beliefs or behavior and the social context. At a certain point, it's valid to cut ties. This topic is hard to navigate because there's so much nuance, and it's tough to know where to draw the line. But being vegan has taught me that the world isn't divided into oppressors and victims. You can simultaneously be a victim of oppression and a victimizer. That's why we need to target the systems of oppression rather than individuals. Right now, it's common for people to use racist as a pejorative noun describing who someone is to the core, rather than an adjective describing a particular belief or policy. Obviously, it is a noun as well as an adjective, and obviously it should be a pejorative. I'm just saying, strategically, calling someone a racist for saying all lives matter is akin to calling someone a baby killer for eating meat. Technically, it's true, but can't you see how this increases defensiveness? Quick note, I don't want this to come across as tone policing. Tone policing is a silencing tactic used by the opposition to dismiss the concerns of marginalized people. As an advocate for social justice, I'm not part of the opposition, and I want to be clear that I'm mostly speaking to allies here. If you belong to a marginalized group, surely you want the people advocating on your behalf to be effective. I said this in my response to Anna's analysis. I agree that we should strive to be effective communicators, but oppression is never the fault of those advocating for the oppressed, however poorly they're advocating. And it's especially not the fault of the oppressed not properly advocating for themselves. The point is, we have to be strategic, and given what we know about human psychology, we have to be patient and understanding. Sometimes we have to let people be wrong. We can't change every individual in our lives. To cut people out fuels their victim complex. And shame is incredibly ineffective, which is why canceling people often backfires. When someone feels like a victim of the outrage mob, they're more likely to harden their stance than to reconsider it. I realize that not all shame is ineffective. Shame is necessary for social evolution. But there's a difference between toxic shame and productive shame. Toxic shame is calling someone a piece of trash, scum of the earth, irredeemable, or attacking their character. Productive shame is pointing out the harm in their words or actions and holding them accountable. Having said that, of course some people are indeed irredeemable scum. I think the problem with using racist as a pejorative noun to describe anyone who says something racist is that it becomes synonymous with being a bad person. And to accept that our aunt, uncle, or cousin said something racist is essentially to say they're a bad person. But if you recognize that good people do and believe bad things, you can let go of the cognitive dissonance that hinders you from seeing microaggressions and right-wing policies as racist. As much as I want social justice advocates to be better communicators, I also want people to stop generalizing groups and using negative stereotypes to dismiss facts and rational arguments. We should teach our children how to be effective and compassionate communicators, but we should also teach them how to recognize and name logical fallacies. Bringing up the behavior or tone of leftists, for example, is an ad hominem, and exaggerating and misrepresenting leftist arguments by insisting that the most extreme and inflammatory views are representative of the left is a straw man. That was long-winded, but in conclusion, the intolerant left is a myth created by centrists and conservatives in order to dismiss leftist arguments. Even if it were true that progressives were more eager to disassociate from conservatives than the other way around, this would have no bearing on the validity of our claims. Anecdotally, I've never blocked anyone due to political differences, but I have been blocked by conservatives. And I know many leftists who hold the same standards as me when it comes to judging others. Some people genuinely believe that disassociating from right-wingers entirely is the morally righteous thing to do. It's a way to signal their zero-tolerance policy for bigotry. But this is a misconstrual of the paradox of tolerance, because association with someone does not imply endorsement or tolerance of every view they hold. And I don't think that disassociating from someone who displays bigoted beliefs is the only way to signal a zero-tolerance policy for bigotry. You can make your views known and push back against their beliefs in a way that acknowledges their humanity and minimizes defensiveness. And in my opinion, that is the difference between being a true warrior of social justice and a social justice warrior. Finally, to answer the question, am I a social justice warrior? I guess that's for you to decide. I dared to criticize Sam Harris for his neoliberal centrist politics, and his fanboys rushed in to call me a whiny, triggered snowflake, so I guess I can't escape it. I feel like no matter how well I convey my thoughts, there will always be a subset of people who will brand me as an SJW, so it's whatever. I'm not sure I want to reclaim the term and identify as a social justice warrior, because for one, I want to distinguish myself from the people who hold regressive views and exhibit the obnoxious behavior I described throughout this video. And second, it feels a bit self-aggrandizing to refer to myself as a warrior for social justice. I'm no Angela Davis. Thank you so much for watching. Please give this video a thumbs up and let me know what you think in the comments. Alright, peace out.
Yo, how when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me nah eat no fish, nah no meat now. How when me eat them, I wonder when me yam. When me tell them say that I'm a vegan man. How when me eat them, I wonder when me eat. When me tell them say me nah eat no fish, nah no meat now.